What's up? This is Freeride Fundamentals with Jon Penfield. I'm here to show you all the best tips and tricks for riding off the groomers and maximizing how much fun you're having on your snowboard every single day. Today we're going to be talking about starting off your season and starting it safely and avoiding any under the snow obstacles. All right, so early season, even on the trails, oftentimes is a game of controlling your speed to avoid damaging your board or crashing on rocks. So in this kind of situation, especially as you go further down the slope, you might encounter more and more rocks, and you really want to ride slowly and try to control your speed as much as you can when there's good snow, and ride flat-based or even straight down over patches of rocks. So in this case, I'm going to try to place my turns where I see more snow to slow down and then not turn when I'm going over these rocky sections. Especially here, there's some moguls too, and those kind of help you identify where the snow is packed up, and you can take a turn there, scrub a bunch of speed, and then be able to ride through the rocky sections without damaging your board. So when you're riding in a whiteout, it's really hard to see because everything's white. A couple good things that can help out with that. Number one is riding close to other features like these rocks, these sticks, these trees. That can really give you some extra definition because you're only going to have shadows around these kind of items. Another one is to follow behind other people, and you can look at their skis or their snowboard to get an idea of the kind of terrain bumps that they're going over. You really want to make sure that you don't snag your tip on anything, any buried logs or anything like that. So it's really good to do sort of a manual type riding where you're leaning back a lot more than you normally would, just to make sure that your nose stays above the surface, especially when you're closer to what might be obstacles. There's some obstacles down here, and I might go over some of them, and I'm going to make absolute certain that my nose is out of the snow when I ride over them. So when you're riding through an area that has thin snow, you really want to try to do your speed control where you're certain that the snow is a lot deeper. So riding from down here, I'm going to be going really slow. And then once I get into this area, I see that it's a lot deeper and the snow's a lot smoother. So that means that there's probably a lot less rock under there. So I can dump a bunch of speed in this section before I enter that thicker section down below that's likely going to be a little less covered in there. When you're out riding, you really want to pay attention to what the snow density profile is like. So oftentimes if you're somewhere cold and it's windy like this, you're going to have some pretty fluffy snow that's really just barely covering these features. So that's something you want to watch out for, especially in an open area like this boulder field here, where the wind's been blowing. You can see around me here that there's a lot of wind curvature throughout this rock from wind blowing through. That's a really big indication that we're going to have, not very dense of snow on top of this rock here. So here we've got a nice cat track to launch off of, but there's a couple hazards we can see down here in the landing. They're really obvious right now, but later on in the season, once the snow fills in, they might be impossible to see. So it's a really good idea to take a mental note of where these hazards are. So one, there's a boulder right here that you really don't want to hit. And number two, even worse, is this stump that's sticking out. It's pointing up, so that makes it way more hazardous if you run into it. What we can see is above this rock, closer to these trees, is super clear. There's no hazards there right now, so you can send it off there once the snow fills in. But you definitely want to be super cautious around this area further down the cat track. You want to look for the less steep slopes in order to have the lowest chance of hitting rocks. So if I try to ride somewhere down there where it's thicker, there's a lot of rock, and I'm going to have to dump my speed by turning hard. But over on this open area where it's a little bit more gentle, it's a lot smoother, and there's a much lower chance of hitting any rocks in that zone. So it's early season, and you're feeling warmed up, and you're ready to start sending it off drops and cliffs and whatnot. There's a few key points that you want to be aware of. Number one, I think, is a really good idea to wear a helmet early season, mid-season, anytime you're going to be potentially hitting rocks. I feel like early season is one of the most hazardous times because there are so many of those rocks that are barely covered. So it's a good idea to have a helmet on anytime you might be around rocks like that. Number two, you want to start small and work your way up throughout the season. So don't immediately go to that biggest cliff that you haven't hit that season yet. Try with something small, see how your body reacts to it, see how the snowpack is, and get a feel for that. Number 3, when you do start hitting bigger cliffs, you want to be absolutely certain that there aren't any rocks in the landing. So the best way to do that is to check out that landing before you hit it, maybe even before the next powder day, and feel around, make sure there's no hazards in there, and then you can be totally confident that you're not going to hit any rocks on your landing. The thing about cliffs is you do have a huge amount of downward velocity, and if that is stopped by a hard object, it can be really painful or damaging, which is quite a bit different than if you're doing park jumps where you can still land on ice and it's all right because you know you've got this downward transition. In freeriding and jumping off cliffs, you're really reliant on having a certain depth of powder in some situations to really slow down your speed and give you this gradual deceleration so that you can hit these larger airs that have somewhat flatter landings.
If you're enjoying our videos, then make sure to come and check out Addiction Plus. It is the best snowboard coaching program in the world. As a member of Addiction Plus, you get access to our structured snowboard courses that range from beginner to expert, and you can track your progression, weekly live coaching sessions with us, upload your own videos for analysis of your riding, personalized feedback to help you fast track your progression, and the ability to attend our in-person events. Addiction Plus is incredible value and the most effective way for you to fast track your riding. Come join us now.
Once you're ready to start sending it off cliffs, you want to be absolutely certain when you go up in bigger sizes that you know that that landing doesn't have any rocks in it. So for example, I've already checked this cliff next to me. It's got some rocks in the landing. I checked that on previous storms, so I'm not going to hit that one. But this one I've checked weeks ago and it was already fully packed with good snow underneath. So now I know for certain that I'm not going to tag any rocks when I send this. So even though it's a little bit tracked out, it's still good to go. In whiteout conditions like this, it's oftentimes pretty hard to tell what your landing is going to be like or even how far away it is. So a really good thing you can do is make a snowball and throw that into your landing. So as long as the snow is soft, you'll be able to see a little bit more depth by tossing that snowball and looking for the hole that it makes. And that'll really help, one, give you an idea of how far down your landing is, and number 2, give you an idea of how soft the snow is. Sometimes you have to throw a pretty big snowball to break through that surface, but if it's good powder, then even a small snowball will make a mark and you'll be able to tell that you've got a nice soft landing coming for you. So as your season progresses and you start riding faster, riding more full on, you really want to be riding to the terrain that you're in. So if you're in terrain that you feel confident about, you have good snow quality, you can really push it. But if you're in terrain where it's maybe rocky, maybe has other hazards, you really want to tone down your speed, take a speed check before you get into that sketchier terrain. And you can be a lot safer as long as you slow down before you get to that hazard. So as you're riding down the mountain, oftentimes that snowpack is going to diminish. And you really got to watch out, especially early season, for that snowpack to diminish quickly once you get to that kind of snow line. And oftentimes that'll change depending on which direction your slope is facing. So you really want to pay attention to that. Like north-facing slopes oftentimes will have more snow, but also slopes that are getting the wind blown at them. So your windward slopes are going to be sometimes scoured. And then your leeward slopes, where all that wind is depositing snow, can be quite a bit deeper. So those are really good things to pay attention to as you ride around your mountain, so that you know, hey, I'm on a windward slope that's been scoured by the wind. It's also south facing and has had a lot of sun, so there might not be very much snow there. Or the snowpack might diminish quite a bit as you get down to lower elevations. So that's something I'm paying attention to all the time, everywhere I'm riding, taking note of how deep the snow is, how well all the hazards are covered, and that lets me really start to push it once I do know that those hazards are covered and the next snowstorm comes and we're ready to go and ready to really go for it. So yeah, definitely watching for that as you go down the mountain, and especially once you start wanting to ride in some tree sections or other runs that go down to the bottom, it's a really good idea to look at those runs from below and assess how much snow is there. Oftentimes early season, the trees might look fantastic from above, but you might drop in and find that the snow really dries out a lot and that there's barely any coverage once you get to the bottom. So if you take like the cat track that goes around the bottom of it, or even look from the town with binoculars or something like that, you can get a really good idea of how much coverage there is at the bottom of the run before you actually commit to going down the run. So that way, when you do drop in, you know that you have snow coverage and you're not going to come up across any super hazardous low snow conditions. So thanks for tuning in. I hope these tips can help you out. Definitely let me know if you think this is helpful or if you got any other critiques in the comments. Stoked for you guys to have a great season and carry on throughout the season. Ride safe, make smart choices, and most of all, have fun. Catch you for the next one.